So let me have a quick look at who is there. All right, I have 7 people coming in. 8. Hi, folks. We're probably just going to wait for another couple of minutes for everyone to come in, settle down, and then get going. Okay, I think we can get started, and people can trickle in or drip in as we progress along. So, welcome everyone. It's very nice to meet you. I This is Manav. I'm the co-founder here at BarRaiser, and welcome everyone to another part of our webinar series. Today, we will discuss about building inclusive work culture and how AI can help with it. I'm joined today with esteemed speakers, Jamila Conley from F5. She leads the talent acquisition there. And Warren Dukes, who is the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at United Way of Central Indiana. I would like the speakers to just provide a quick round of introduction about themselves, and then we'll jump right into it. Jamila, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm Jamila Conley. I'm really happy to be here today and a part of this conversation. And I work for F5, formerly known as F5 Networks, a high-end enterprise B2B company focused on security, load balancing, and networking. And I lead up our global talent acquisition team, and I'm a long timer of F5. So I actually started in IT, worked in our M&A integration function, as well as our business transformation. So I have a well-rounded operational background in addition to HR now.
Welcome. Thank you. Warren?
Yes, and good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. And as Manav, it's a pleasure to be here with you and Jamila today. I look forward to this great conversation and the shared wisdom that Jamila will accompany with here today. I am currently with United Way of Central Indiana, and my role again is the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belongingness. And we concentrate on belongingness because we see the endeavor of an inclusive environment is specific to every individual. And so how they show up in our space is how we want to give attention to how we build our culture. My work prior to United Way was 20 plus years or more in the education arena, higher education arena. Where my work was mostly centered in criminal justice systems and sociological systems, and instructing the future minds to help us bridge the gap between what we desire to see in the community and where we are today. So A lot of what I will share today will be built upon the experiences of both the higher education arena as well as what I've gained and in my role here at United Way for going on 3 years.
Thank you, Warren. And I'm sure that'd be an interesting conversation considering your experience is also uh, not just within the organization, but overall a larger community, right? So DEI and belonging within the larger community. So
Absolutely.
great to have you both. And so I guess while I don't believe that while I believe that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's also understood that DEI as a topic is very largely discussed and maybe beaten a lot already. However, what we try to look here is how inclusivity can be promoted or enabled through AI. So before I get to inclusivity part of DEI, I'd love to know your general thoughts, and any one of you can probably pick it up as a who goes first on your thoughts on AI, right? And both in terms of what your professional thoughts are, and maybe also what you think about it personally, uh, about the Gen AI and the recent revolution, so called, in AI.
Sure. So for me, and when I just think about AI in general outside of the workplace, or actually inside the workplace, it's both exciting and a bit terrifying. On one hand, and I've used Chat GPT to help me with some things that it would have taken me a lot longer to really think through, and given me, in a matter of almost seconds, a framework to start from, and then to build from there, whether I'm building out a template or, writing a letter or a policy or something like that. I think it's fantastic. But then also the security side of me, and coming out of IT, and just knowing that if you don't have the right controls in place, that this can quickly spin out of control. So it also terrifies me a bit of, if this isn't controlled, what's going to happen. You've already heard the stories about, people utilizing AI, and especially in our world of Zoom and interviews, that you can't trust anymore that the person you're interviewing is telling you their thoughts, or are they, getting it from AI. We've seen the deep fakes on, in the news media, things like that. So, it's like, I think AI is both a game changer, but it definitely has that looming effect that you always have to kind of keep in perspective of, without the right safeguards and the right controls, we can get ourselves in a world of hurt and danger really quickly, and especially as we're applying that to the workplace.
Well said. And then have you seen some of these risks coming up or presenting themselves in your workplace, or someone that you might know?
Well, not yet. I would say we're still like everyone else. We're really early on our journey. We're being relatively cautious, and making sure that we're thinking through how we're going to use AI, and cautioning people and how they engage with generative AI. So we haven't seen it yet, but that's because we're trying to be cautious to make sure that we're doing this correctly, the right way the first time.
And what about you, Warren, especially in the context of the wider community? How do you see yourself, or how do you see implementing AI in your day-to-day?
That's a good question, and I pondered on that to give it a little thought, and I like the way Jamila has taken it, and I agree with Jamila in her summation of it. We see this as a tool of expediency, where we could use programming, technological advanced programming, in order to achieve information at a quicker pace than before. But at the same time, to me, there's a threat to the human intellectual growth when we rely so solely on technology to be our thought provider as well as our end goal definer. And one of the things that kind of scares me, and I kind of goes back to something that Albert Einstein said, kind of dug Albert out after reviewing the movie um, recently, I forget the name of the movie, where you begin to see that in his work, he was looking at technology as a growth and a quick paced opportunity, but at the same time, if human relations does not grow at the same pace as technology, then we have a threat to human relations, how we interact, how we view the world, and how do we interact with that world. And so that's where I kind of have that level of caution. And in the DEI work, I am very cautious about any applications there because this work is human relations. It is really about connectivity, and the more technology to me means disconnectivity. And we cannot afford in this day and age to have any use of a tool or any thought processes that kind of employ disconnectedness because we see a need for expediency. So we need to protect intellectual growth. Technology has a way of us leaning on it too heavily, where we do not begin to rely on our own intellectual capacity to grow and learn and to compete. And we just cannot allow that to be something that is compromised as we're still continuing to work on trying to build an inclusive environment. That does require interrelations. But I do see some promise where we can learn at a quicker pace on others as how we program that AI so that it does inform us more on what we are learning about people. And at the same time, one of the advantages that I see as a great advantage is the expediency of using this application for both small and large scale data processing and analysis. You know, we can begin to track trends, we can begin to look at patterns a lot quicker pace, but we should not then move away from looking at that data output from a human eye to see what we may have missed, because there may still be some inherent biases there.
Interesting. And I assume when you say disconnected, because when I think about technology, especially, like the times that the cell phones came in and social media, people sort of thought they're more connected. But I guess what you're talking about being disconnected is being disconnected with, let's say, within the human capacity or the human touch. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. Because if you look at the growth, and just as you just explained, social media and the birth of social media
Right.
and how that has expanded, we spend more times on cell phones and then those platforms that gives us our source of information of who we are and how much degree of that is truth. And so, absent the human connection to really challenge what we're gaining from technology, we're really going to be vulnerable. We're now becoming an algorithm because every time you connect to these devices, they're feeding you based upon the algorithm that you are composed of through their calculation. And so you're going to receive information that is geared to how you're processing and thinking. To me, that stifles intellectual growth and the potential for humans to use their own intellectual challenges and how they see the world.
Yeah, and one of the things I also want to add on to that, to what you're saying, Warren, is even bringing that back to companies, not just talent acquisition, that as we start learning more about generative AI, it's really key to understand how the models in AI are being fed. Because to your point, that's where bias can come in. That's where we start segmenting off how we're selecting and thinking and using the tools. And I also just have one of the risks I kind of see with AI is that people get excited about the productivity and the efficiency gains that you can get from AI, which is great, but my fear is people trying to over index on that. And, and similar to, I'd say, 20, 30 years, or say 20 years ago, as we were getting more sophisticated with automated voice systems and, to reduce call centers. And it's just like, oh, we'll send them through the automated voice system. And what we found is that you can't get rid of the complete human element. At some point, the technology cannot solve everything for you. And when you think about a customer experience, like, I don't know about you, I still hate talking to an automated voice system. I want to get to a human as, as quickly as possible. So I think that's the same thing we have to be cognizant of, that there's this thought of like, oh, we have all these productivity gains through AI. How can we reduce some of the human touch, the human element that can be expensive, and then end up shortcutting our customer experience, end up causing frustration for our customers, for our employees, for our candidates from a talent acquisition perspective, and then also being really cognizant on like what's the bias that's coming in as we're putting more automation into the system, and how those models are shaping the results and the outcomes, and are those the results and outcomes that we really want.
Absolutely. In fact, when when a lot of people talk about AI, I think the way they're perceiving it is automating intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. Because, as you rightly said, a lot of them are trying to over-index on the automation part, and rightfully so, because it does help tremendously in that. However, the bias in the training models do exist, and it's a very big risk, is what I hear. Also, what we are working on, so I think a lot of folks out there are working on is how to make AI sort of bias free, right? So new models are being trained on, and people are trying to use AI to remove bias from conversations, which is also a lot of work happening within that space. So totally agree that it has to be used with a caution, as well as human touch cannot go away. But that brings me to the next part, which is hiring, right? Or talent acquisition, or building high-performing teams, let me put it this way. So in terms of using AI for doing our jobs within hiring, automating a lot of mundane jobs, right? That's one part. The other part is areas where it starts affecting decisions. What do you see in as typical risks in this talent acquisition and usage of AI in talent acquisition?
Well, for me, one of the things I'd say is I'm actually really excited about AI and the talent acquisition space. And for everything I just said, is because of the productivity gains, the efficiency gains, and how it can help my recruiters continually deliver an exceptional experience to candidates. So where I'm looking to utilize AI is, one, in the resume screening process. And again, this is a very key place where you have to be cognizant of bias and how is it feeding the models, but how can we use AI to help us screen based on skills and requirements to bring forward what are those top resumes, so that it's like if we get 1,000 resumes in or 500 resumes in for a role, it's not feasible to think that a recruiter is going to be able to review all those anyway. But being able to utilize AI of at least coming back and saying, hey, here's the top 20, based on your requirements. And that way the recruiter can then spend their time on screening the top ones. But then you also have to have process on the other side of it. It can't just be reliant on AI. And this is where kind of the bias piece comes in. And for like at F5, we're very intentional in a lot of our diversity efforts. How are we ensuring balanced slates? And we're thinking about that. So we have process to help combat any bias, such that if what the AI were to come back with was like all the people with the same kind of background, and and it's just like, and everything was homogeneous, that then my recruiters know, okay, well, we found 5 great people, but they're all homogeneous. So now let me take extra effort to go and see where I can find talent, so that we have a balanced slate. So it's not just the AI. You don't want to use, in my mind, you don't want to use the AI for decision making. You want it to help you. It's like the difference between riding a bike and driving a car. a car is more efficient, but it doesn't necessarily mean you want the car to drive for you. So, it's just like you want the efficiency to go faster, but you still have to have someone at the wheel. But that's one place I'm looking to use AI. The other place is within the candidate experience of how can we utilize AI to help drive better communications throughout the hiring process back to the candidate. Because if you think about, again, and especially when you're in a hiring frenzy, like we experienced in 2021 and 2022,
Right.
that if you're a recruiter and you're handling, 20, 30 recs at a time, which no recruiter ever should, but it was the reality back then. And if you on average have 5 candidates per rec, that easily gets out of hand. And from a candidate perspective, they just want to know information. And it's so frustrating that once you've done an interview and you don't know those next steps, the recruiter can't call everyone. So I think this is a great place to be able to utilize the AI chat bots to be able to say, hey, you finished your final round of interviews. Here's the next step in the process. Here's when you're going to hear from a human again. And I can let you know if something happens where, say, the debrief call gets rescheduled, to just continually set that expectation with candidates to help candidates reduce the anxiety they'll naturally have and help the recruiters knowing that, okay, we have an actual decision and ready to make an offer, that when they call to tell that candidate that, the candidate's not like, I didn't think I was getting an offer because I hadn't heard from you, in over a week. So I think there's opportunity to utilize AI in that way. And then obviously there's the low hanging fruit of automated scheduling and helping to schedule interviews so that our recruiting coordinators can really help with more of that white glove experience for candidates and utilizing AI in that way. So like I said, I'm really excited about how we can use AI and talent acquisition, but you definitely need to have processes on either side to make sure you still have that human experience as a part of it.
Right. So in a way that AI actually helps recruiter become more efficient so that they can deliver the right sort of candidate experience and focus on it than having to worry about the day-to-day and those mundane tasks. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
Can I also just add a little bit? And I like the way you saw, Jamila, how the use of the technology plus also the human behind the system also being partnered with that technology. And the piece that really struck me what you were saying was, how do you avoid that sameness when the technology AI gives you this output of those 20 candidates, but they all have that similarity. And so from a culture standpoint, is that good for your organization? Are you looking for sameness, and how does that begin to stifle some of the growth of the culture of the organization as well? And put a threat to the little diversity when it comes to diversity that is both visible and invisible, as well as those of thought. So that is one of the concerns I have as a risk of how you see it, because again, it uses algorithms, and we're all going to have, if you meet those categories on the job description, then that's consistency of an algorithm, which is also saying we're all the same. We have much similarity. Right. Another piece too that I think is of concern is really looking at, as we're building our employee base, we're looking at, personality types matter. And sometimes that is not evident through, and most times I'm guessing that's not evidence through a algorithm or a resume itself. And so it does require that person on the back end to really begin to look at, well, who's been omitted from this process? And is it opportunity to look back? I may have the top 20 according to the AI system, but can I look back and find another 20 that the system say not be consistent with our requirements? So trying to give due diligence to say that let's not give total reliance there to technology to make the full decision, but it does require, and it may be a burden, but we have to look at how that really how to support staff as they're beginning to use that technology and not rely on that technology.
Agreed.
Totally. Just for the audience, I'm going to roll out a small poll, and you guys can take your time to fill it. It's on till I get some feedback. But as we go along, right, and we talked about biases that a system has, and as humans we have biases as well. Do you see bias within a system as less tameable than biases in a technology, or is there a cocktail between the two that can help it become less biased or unbiased? Any thoughts on that?
Oof. I was, I struggle with that because I look at it as output in is what you get, input versus output.
Right.
If you're in a society of bias and you're creating systems, you're inherently putting in your lens, and we can do all the due diligence and educate ourselves to try to really own our biases and to really try to mitigate those as we are building systems and building cultures, et cetera. But at the same time, I don't think we can ever 100% eliminate the application of biases in processes.
Right.
But can we sufficiently minimize, I think becomes the real question. Can we sufficiently minimize that we are not omitting omitting anyone to have opportunity for success and enter into our organizations? So I mean, I don't see it possible to have a 100% absolute unbiased technological system because it requires a human to have a little input, and how much freedom do you give that algorithm to recreate itself?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's just it. Like you said, whatever you feed a model, anything you're inputting, it's like you can't get rid of bias because in some ways that's bias in itself. And it just kind of makes me think about your example earlier, Warren, about social media and then what we end up seeing because the algorithm has decided that, oh, these are the things that you like to see. And, and it's just like, and it gets hard to determine, like, how do I get out of this? Like, I'm tired of seeing these same articles that I was reading, 2 years ago. Doesn't mean that's
Exactly.
what I'm interested in right now. So, and it's just like, I think that, like I said, that becomes a bias in itself because the algorithm thinks it's giving you what you want. But we as humans, we change. And sometimes you can't change the input fast enough to really change that bias in the system. And I think that's where I keep coming back to that you have to have processes outside of the technology to be able to balance against any bias that the system may present. Because even if you're feeding and doing your best to feed data that is not biased or does not tend one way or another, that it's still going to happen at some point, or the technology, because as much as we call it artificial intelligence, it's still artificial.
Right.
So it's still going to look for binary ways of what you're saying you want and presenting that back to you. And it's not going to always, and we're as people aren't always going to think about, oh, we need to make this tweak for it to capture this or make that tweak. And personality, like you said earlier, that comes into it too, which is why you can never have a fully automated system because at the end of the day, when you're hiring people, they're people, and you need to make sure that person has the chemistry, the soft skills, the interpersonal skills that no amount of technology is going to be able to fully represent what another person can of how that person will fit into the environment you're bringing them into.
Correct.
Thank you. I'll transition into the next part, just building on that thought, but wanted to share what the polls were on where people see the most benefit of AI within their processes. And I guess more than 60% people said in recruitment. So that's definitely something that we're discussing, and how to minimize the bias right at the start of the whole process, right? So when you talk about building a more inclusive culture within the organization, if you do it at the point where an employee joins the organization, I guess that's just attacking it at the source. I'm going to roll out one more poll. which is how people perceive role of AI in DEI efforts. And while people are trying to respond to this, Jamila, to build on to your point, right? You said processes, and you had a very candid example where
Mhm.
CV shortlisting is being done, and then people are or recruiters are looking at what kind of sample or output are they getting. My question is there a broad framework that you guys use as best practice while building these processes with the application of AI within the talent acquisition world? Uh, and if yes, maybe if you can share it, because that would tremendously help a lot of other folks who are probably sitting on the fence just trying to think, okay, how do I do this? Or is there should I wait for someone else to perfect it and then I get into this myself?
Well, I think there's two questions that you're asking there in my mind, is that when we're thinking about AI and how we implement AI into our talent processes, some of the things we're thinking about is, one, talking to vendors to understand, like I've said before, what are the safeguards they have in place?
Correct.
How are they feeding those models? And then how are they also making sure that the output from their AI systems aren't having any adverse impact? So I'm speaking very narrowly to talent acquisition right now and around resume screening. Of It goes back to our due diligence with vendors of understanding, like, how are you making sure that the output isn't having any adverse impacts on any protected classes or groups, et cetera. So we put a lot of the onus back on the vendors that we're working with to understand that overall safeguarding model of the AI before we implement any AI into our environment for the recruiting tools that we're looking at. So that's one thing that I think everyone should be doing when you're thinking about AI and looking at vendors and assessing vendors, is understanding the safeguards. What are those controls that are in place? Um, Number two, which is what I've already talked about, is that beyond anything that AI can do for us, you still have to have processes outside of the system to be able to detect, identify, and prevent further bias that may crop in, because as we've already talked, is that you'll never be able to 100% stop bias or combat bias. And so you have to have those processes outside of the system of, okay, AI has helped me 80% of the way, but I still have that other 20% to go. And as a human, I need to do these things. And we do that through the implementation of process and policies of what is our expectation for the type of landscape that we're trying to build inside of F5. So that's how, so like I said, it's a two-part question, both around controls in the systems and controls outside of the systems.
Mm-hmm. And to your first part, which is ownership on vendors. While I do understand that most tools or technologies that are built around these models should have an audit mechanism by themselves. Like for example, we have an audit mechanism in trying to see the outcomes, but from the input perspective, the models have become so complex that it's very difficult for people to even predict how they are going to come out. So I guess one way of doing that is to constantly monitor the outcome, as you said, right? Like the CVs that are coming up at the top, are they homogeneous or not? And that's something that needs to be kept definitely in place.
Yeah, well, it comes back, and I just want to say that it comes back to data, right? And how are you thinking about that data? So when I talk about training the models, is understanding what's the data that they're feeding that. So say in this instance where we're talking about resume screening, and if I'm talking to a vendor about AI, putting AI for resume screening, and I ask them, hey, what data are you using to screen the models? And they say, well, we look at requirements, we look at schools, and we look at skills. That looking at schools in itself can present bias. So it's like, so then it helps you then think about, okay, what's the next question that I need to ask of like, okay, when you look at school, tell me more about that, because it may be, oh, we look at, students from the top schools that all have gone Ivy League and MIT or something like that. And then, it's like, and that's where you can, either they're going to say, oh, no, we look at this broadly and we don't aggregate based on that, or we do aggregate. And so, and starting just to understand more about how they're utilizing data inside those models where it may present bias and have a adverse impact on certain classes of projected classes of people.
Got it. And Warren, in your work, for example, if I talk mostly about unconscious bias, is there some way that technology can help in eliminating unconscious bias? Because conscious bias is something that people can definitely intervene then and there. It's a lot of it is unconscious or subconscious.
Yeah, that is true. And, we have technology today to unmask those inherent biases that we don't believe we have. And someone look at that technology and that output and say, well, no, that's not me. So there's the automatic defense to, the exposure of what we find a system has shown us is bias. But at the same time, I don't. I'm on the fence. I really can't really see AI helping us to eliminate unconscious bias, but as another tool for understanding what they are and how we begin to control. And perhaps there is. I mean, I'm not familiar with the algorithm, so the geniuses who create those algorithms may be able to come up with that. But as I see how human behavior acts, and I see it as, what do we really do with the information when we have it? How do we begin to, as Jamila was saying earlier, or just recent, as we're taking that information from the data, it's what we do with it. AI gives us the outputs, what we do with it. And so is that system able to go to a sequence of critical thinking of its own output before we even receive it? Or is it incumbent upon the person who's receiving that output to scrutinize the data, understand that data, and then ask the critical layered questions to really determine whether or not, all biases have been examined and controlled in this output that I'm looking at. And it kind of reminds me of, and I just, as Jamila was talking and I was getting that thought together, it kind of reminds me of when I used to be in higher education and I taught a research methods class, and a part of that was statistics. And I would always teach my students, even though we had the technology of SPSS, I always taught them how to do the hand calculations of outcomes so that they'll know what the system is seeing and how to go back and find error quickly if they have to do it. And I'm not saying we need to think and train and learn and know how AI is operating behind the scenes, but at the same time, it says we have to be able to first still scrutinize the data. Let's not take it at face value. And we know what we desire, we know what we want. Can we really decipher that it has been completely controlled and authenticated through a artificial system that we're giving a whole lot of trust?
I totally get that. In fact, I'd like to share a quick anecdote about it as well. So one of the key areas that I see, especially to address unconscious bias, is the most effective thing is getting aware of your unconscious bias, right? Because once you get aware, a lot of it actually you start self-correcting. And while it is unconscious, that's one of the reasons that getting aware of it becomes more difficult. And how we experimented with AI to bring those unconscious bias quantifiably out based on conversations that you have, the words that you use, the context that you put them in, let's say a man versus a woman, across different races and so on. And so that was a very, very interesting study. And that's one way that I saw AI helping out, making people more aware about their subconscious or unconscious bias.
And at
But
the same time, Manav, a lot of these social identities are shifting and changing as we become more informed about people and have the freedom to define who we desire to present ourselves to the world to be. And so how much is is AI and that technology keeping up with our own human choices and changes of identity, and how we begin to classify and quantify those as well? And there's just, the human beings can run at a different pace than the technology, whether that could be outpacing in a thought to how we begin to re-identify. And the technology is still programmed in a singular way of identifications that are common in our social environments. And so it really begins to say, where is the technology most useful, most beneficial? Is it really truly in the early stages of really getting in from a recruitment standpoint? Is it from a DEI position where we'll be able to look at data more efficiently and quickly in order to identify trends and patterns so that we can create from our own critical thinking those processes that help our various units? How do we use the two to complement, but understand where one has its prominence in its use and not try to cross-link them and have the technology to be the one that we lean on the greatest?
Thank you for that. I would just like to open the floor for some Q&A. I know already there are 2 questions in. Some of them have been partially answered, but I'll still lay them out. So I have a question from an anonymous attendee. How can AI-driven insights can be leveraged to identify biases in the workplace? So I guess the example that I took was more around talent acquisition, but if you guys think about this or have implemented something which can help identify biases within the workplace, please, anyone want to take that?
Well, I can go first, and I think it kind of answers the first and a little bit of the second question as well. And so for me, when I think about insights that we can drive from AI and thinking about both identifying biases and helping with career opportunity and growth, is if a company doesn't have a strong, say, talent mobility program of how people move around, a lot of times the people who have the most access to leaders and decision makers end up being the people who get promoted and get the strong projects. And if you put in a framework where you can utilize AI and have a way that you're starting to capture the skills of your employees, you can use AI to start capturing that information and helping from a talent acquisition perspective, that as roles come available and stretch opportunities come available, that the AI can then help you start matching who could be a strong match internally for some of these growth opportunities, that then will force decision makers to take another look versus just reaching into the network of the people they know. And so for me, that's an example of how AI-driven insights can help us start, not just because we have a tendency when we don't have these systems in place to think about, oh, who do I know? And if my reach isn't very far, then I'm going to ask them, who do they know? And so it keeps things close. And then you kind of have this cycle of the same people who are close to the people who are the decision makers. And then the people, especially when you start thinking amongst diverse employee groups, people who may not have that same access that are doing excellent jobs, no one knows about them because they haven't made it through those social channels of this is someone to look at, where AI can start to pull that out and you get a stronger slate to consider. So those are my thoughts on how AI can really help both with that talent development, career growth, and removing some of that bias of, oh, I thought I was going to just promote this person that works closely with me, but the AI is saying we have 3 other people who may be good contenders. Let's now pull them all into a loop and see who really is the best.
Interesting. So do it more evidence-based and in a, let's say, relatively fairer manner.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Interesting. I have Warren, you want to take any of this? Just to for everyone, the second question that Jamila was pointing to is actually how does AI help in talent development strategies, contributing to create equal opportunities for career growth? Um, Warren, you want to take a shot at that, or I should go to the next one?
Oh, I think Jamila really covered that real well. And just to address a little bit of the first, and I'm kind of curious too, a lot of the AI-driven insights from that first question, as far as identity biases in the workplace. Some of that, it's a catch-22, or maybe there's something that I'm missing here, because I'm looking at ADA compliance and a lot of the protected information that you just don't have readily accessible about persons because of self-reporting. Those things I think will be missed. Those identities will be missing some of this AI piece because unless it is really offered, it can't really be controlled in the work environment, in the workplace.
Right. But I guess the point is that within the limited amount of data set, which is also not very minuscule to run analysis and patterns on, this can present itself as coming out. However, what to your point, people who don't self-declare then obviously get left behind to a certain extent.
Right.
But yeah, true. I have a very interesting question from Nash. So this is regarding the recent tweets between Elon Musk and Mark Cuban, right? So where he talks about DEI being dead and skills taking over DEI over a period of time, and is it skill over diversity and so on. So for people who don't have the context, please go ahead and read Musk's tweets recently. But given the recent debate, right, and it's sort of heated up at least in the last 1 week or so, can you talk about the diverse slate, how to balance it with skills required? How do you see AI being used to create that diverse slate?
This is one that like touches deeply to me, so I will keep my composure. It's not an either or. It is not diverse or skills required. It's an and. It's around finding the best talent that is also diverse. So to me, having a diverse slate, and one of the things we have what's called a balanced slate exception process that we have in place, because we're always looking for diverse talent that has the skills required for the job. But if we can't find those skills, we have an exception process that we go through. And we do this because we want to make sure that we're staying on top of our own game of like, hey, here's how I tried to go out and source. And, it's like, this was the talent that we found. And we found the people we want to move forward with in an interview. And that's fine. It's just more of how did we go about sourcing and doing our due diligence to find people with the required skills that happen to be diverse. So to me, there is no debate that there are a lot of people who fit in a diverse category that have the skills. And the debate has been trying to put an or in there versus the and.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very nicely put. Warren, you have an opinion about it?
Same opinion. I think where the misnomer comes from is really understanding the placement of DEI and what it truly is and what it represents. And you can talk to 10 DEI professionals and you will have 10 different approaches to how they are proceeding with the work in their own space. To me, even though we are still, we're in a society where we're really trying to figure out where the best talent is, how do we acquire that best talent and make ourselves more productive as organizations, because to organizations by the bottom line. And so the question you ask yourself, as others try to say that this work is dying, which I greatly refute, the question you ask yourself is, is this something new? Is this something we've always had? We have been working towards. We have been working towards diversity, equity, and inclusion since the onset of American society. And as we are trying to look at our economic and and the organizations that really fuel America. We really look and say, as some of the founders found when some of the leaders found when we went through the civil rights era, is that, when we keep diverse talent out of the workplace, it does not make us globally competitive. So in a globally competitive world, you want the greatest talent without exception in your organization. And so having a conscious lens on what are your needs and who are the persons who have these great talents that you need, regardless of all the other social categories that we use to describe them. Can we acquire them? That becomes the end goal, because to not look for the best talent, whether you use AI to do it or whether you use a conscientious recruitment staff that is diligent to saying, we want to make sure that we have every thought leader at the table that can benefit us in our organizational goals and what we're trying to achieve for our organization. We want to have the best persons of intellectual capacity to be in and really challenge information and to provide us information that we may not have been privy to about people, populations, and identities before. Because what we're trying to do in this global society is to really build, units and whatever, whether it's widgets or whatever. We're trying to make those outputs useful to persons who may look the same or different from who's in the boardrooms or within the organization leadership. So we have to understand the benefit of diversity first and how it's been applied across sectors, and understand that each industry will have different use of it. But the end goal, as I keep losing light in here, timely. The end goal of all of this is to really have the best talent in the room. And I'm not going to get on and really the approach of where Elon Musk and Mark Cuban is coming from. Everybody has their perspective. I just echo what Jamila said in that regard, but I just wanted to add that, what is the end goal and what do we see as talent? How do we define talent and how do we acquire that talent, regardless of some of the social conditions that we have traditionally used?
Very nicely put. Thank you. With that, I think we're going to wrap this up. Any last thoughts that you guys might want to share with the audience?
I think the only last thought that I would have is, and I've said it several times through this conversation, is be both intentional, thoughtful, but cautious as you're approaching your AI journey. Make sure you understand the safeguards and make sure that there are processes and policies outside of the tool to make sure that you're balancing your approach and utilizing the tool not only for its efficiency, but to help you drive the most effective outcome.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah, and I would just say too, with that, technology in itself has been a benefit to all humankind as we have existed. It's access to this technology that makes a difference. And so as we are beginning to look at the use of this and the access of this AI technology, let's not forget the human capacity and the need for human intelligence to continue to grow and increase. And that requires us to still remain ever connected and not technology to disconnect us, where we're sitting in silos and we misinterpret our data that we receive because we're not having the human conversations.
Very well said. Thank you. Once again, Jamila, Warren, thank you very much. All the attendees, everyone who joined in, thank you so much for giving us your time. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was really, really insightful. I hope the same for you. People who could not join us today, they'll definitely receive a recording for this. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise.
And thanks for everyone for the questions.
Yeah, very thought-provoking.
Yeah. Thank you.